Carlos Ramirez, owner of NVS Audio, Roselle, New Jersey. Eric brought us his mint condition Road Glide to upgrade the audio on. So the bike had a full Hertz stereo, Hertz 6.5 in the fairing, Hertz 6.5 in the lowers, Hertz 6 mines in the lids. Had two Hertz amplifiers, 4.900 in the fairing and the 500 watt smaller Hertz amp in the saddlebag. He had taken to another shop and they had convinced him, because he had started with the fairing speakers and the lids, they convinced him that if he did Hertz mid-bass drivers in the lowers, that he wouldn't need woofers in the bags, and that should give him the sound he was looking for, and it just didn't do it for him. So we're adding a DSP. We're moving the 500 watt Hertz in the fairing next to the 900 watt Hertz amplifier, so there's gonna be two amplifiers in the fairing. We're doing 10-inch mid-bass drivers in the bags, sealed imported in the stock bags. We're doing a 3000.1 in the tour pack, and we're upgrading the battery. We're not changing any of the speakers in the front. They sound fine. We're adding a DSP so we can dial them in a little better and fully control the sound. Now, everything looked pretty neat. I pulled the seat, I looked. Everything's covered in Tech Flex. All the wires are tested taped. So I thought it would be an easy upgrade. Just add on to the upgrade until I started taking stuff apart. Once I started unraveling the Tesla tape, because he asked me to check his air ride because the center stand stopped working and he had just used it the night before. So the air ride stuff is Eric's fault. He did the wiring himself. The audio stuff is the previous shop's fault, where you'll see what they did with the wiring, and it's really not fair that they did this to him. They ran a wire from the battery that started as 8 gauge, and as I'm looking at the connector, because I'm taking all the wiring apart so we can build the harnesses, solder, extend the wires, and I'm noticing that at the amplifier we have like a 16 gauge wire for power and ground, but at the battery I only see 8 gauge wires. So sure enough, the wire started its life at the battery as 8 gauge, and it came down when they spliced into the connectors to make a quick disconnect from the saddlebag. The wire shrunk down to 16 gauge power and 16 gauge ground, which everybody knows is not enough for a 500 watt amplifier. Don't know why they did this. The wires were all spidered together and a bunch. Another thing that I really dislike, I think there was a total of like 14 wires on the battery terminals between the positive and the negative. It makes it impossible to service the bike. Nobody wants to take the battery bolt off because you never know where the wires are going to end up. And sure enough, there was 2 or 3 black wires on the positive. So if you just take it off, you're just going to move those wires over the negative, thinking black is negative. There was just a bunch of splices. So we couldn't leave it like that. We had to tear it all down, solder and extend all the connectors, move everything to the side, make it serviceable. I do not like a bunch of connectors on the battery. So when we're done with an install, we have the factory power and ground, we have our auxiliary power and ground, then we run a fuse block on the side, and then whatever accessories were hooked up on top of the battery, we fuse them and run them to an auxiliary fuse block. We like to split across 1 or 2 fuses, and then we run all the grounds to the frame. That way it's nice and easy. You remove 2 positives and 2 negatives from the battery, you reinstall 2 positives and 2 negatives from the battery, and everything's back working. This bike has LEDs, this bike has 3 amplifiers now, this bike has air ride. It's just a bunch of stuff on the battery. So we cleaned all that up, put a fuse block on behind the brake side cover the way we always do, rerouted all the wires up the backbone, moved the amplifier, ran true 8 gauge power and ground to each amplifier in the fairing, ran 4 gauge power and ground to the tour pack for the 3000. Our woofer speaker wires are thicker than the power wires they're using to run the amplifiers. That's crazy. So we run thicker wire to our mid-bass drivers than they were running to these amplifiers. But we got it all straightened out. It's a lot of information, so we're going to split this video in 2. This is going to be part 1 of 2. Check it out, what we did to rescue the wiring on this beautiful bike. Okay, this bike came in with a full Hertz system, sound stream, reserve radio, Hertz 6.5, Hertz 6.5, Hertz 6 mines, Hertz amplifier. Bike sounds really good. The customer just wanted more. So we're gonna upgrade it a little bit. We're gonna keep the 6 mines. It's just to meet the client's needs. We're gonna add a little bass, So we're doing 10s in the bags, but it's a good starter system. We're just going to take it the rest of the way. So we're working on this beautiful Road Glide. And there was a Hertz amp in the saddlebag and one in the fairing. So we're going over the wiring to figure out why the bike didn't sound right. And I noticed the power light was flickering as the music was playing. So I said, let me see what that's about. So follow it back. Let's actually do it backwards. So we have power wire coming off the battery. Then it magically goes on a diet. So that is 16 gauge. Trying to run a 500 watt amp. All right, I was joking around before, but now it's starting to get serious. Now we have some high voltage home electric solid wire spliced into some thin automotive wire. And I'm not even sure what this goes to. And I don't see any fuses on this. Somebody thought it'd be a good idea to cut the battery cover bracket off on this side and then use it to mount this relay. And the more I dig, the worse it gets. So remove the bolt. And this is where they have it grounded. That is a plastic panel with a nut insert. Literally worst possible ground. So it wasn't grounding through there, it was grounding through the painted surface. Like, I don't understand why you would do that if the battery ground is only a few inches away, right there. Literally, it reaches, it's right there. And in case you didn't believe me that it was grounded to plastic, there's the insert, and when you go underneath, there's the plastic tray. See that? They literally grounded it to plastic. Now, if they had used this bolt that they used to hold the relay, that's metal. It's not a good ground, but at least it's metal. That's plastic. And then if we move the relay in the harness, look at that. It reaches the ground right there. Well, I guess I know why they chose to ground it there, because there's already 100 things on the battery. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 grounds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 positives. That's the problem. Everybody adds stuff on and they look at the other one and they go, it's not my problem. Well, I'm gonna make it my problem. I'm gonna fix it. We're gonna tie all those grounds together and make it better. So this is a trick that we came up here with at the shop when we're trying to figure out a wiring mess as we disconnect the battery. Every wire we take off the negative, we put a wire tie through. And I'm gonna show you why in a second. So here's the positive. We put a wire tie through every wire that came off the positive. The reason we do that is, as you can see, this is a black wire. So if you assume you're gonna hook that up to negative, and it's not, it's got a fuse on it. The wire changed color and went from red to black. So that would get hooked up incorrectly if we didn't label them or hold them together. Here's another black wire that's also on the positive. So this will save hours of troubleshooting later if you just put a wire tie on every ring terminal that came off the positive and every ring terminal that came off the negative. You gotta remember, a lot of people that do work on these bikes are not professionals. they don't want to tie stuff together. They just do whatever's quickest for them and let the next person deal with it. So now we're gonna troubleshoot all these wires, figure out which each circuit is. We're gonna individually wire each circuit, and then we're gonna tie them together to a separate fuse block. So that way on the battery, there's only be 2 thick positive wires, 2 thick negative wires, and that's it. We're gonna clean all this up. I swear some of you have to think I'm making this stuff up. So we have splice, 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 into a splice, into a spade, into a splice, into a T-tap, into 2 bare wires. This is all under the tester tape. All right, we're gonna keep going. Figured out why his air ride switch is not working. Okay, the crazy mess was the wiring for the air ride. So we have 2 bikes here with the same exact air ride. Brian's bike is wired properly, so I'm going to show you that now versus what's going on the other bike. Same dirty air setup. Solenoids, look how neatly his wires are. Serviceable, quick disconnect, and clean at the battery. The only difference is the client on the red bike has a switch panel here. He has his switch panel here, but the wiring is exactly the same. Nice and clean. Now let's go over the other bike. As you can tell, and this setup's newer, same. Wiring comes up, and this is where all hell breaks loose. So then we have power for the switches there. Then I guess they cut and extend and splice the harness. So these are the wires that run up to the switches. Then they spliced them again here. That's where that wire broke off that goes to here. You see 3 more splices here and 3 more splices here going to those switches. These are all low current wires. They don't need to be that thick, so we're going to replace them with 22 gauge wire that runs in 1 single cable. So the relay we're going to relocate to here. We're going to make it look like the white bike. So this bike is getting switches relocated. These are the cables that we use. So we color code them. So we made a red set and a black set. That way it gives us 8 wires combined. When we go to the other side, there's our black marking. So we know what we're hooking up. Everything's getting soldered. So it's a nice, thin, clean setup. It's the way it should be done. It's the way we're gonna do it. Well, that gives you a clue to what type of technician was working on the bike before. Wire nuts from house electricity. So now the wires are 100% cleaned up. Everything routed to the side, nice and neat. Everything organized. Obviously the reds are power, the blacks are ground, and there's our main feed. Everything is serviceable. We extended and relocated the relay. So I'm halfway done with the wiring rescue. We have cut, soldered, and extended all the wires to this side. So now we have all our power and grounds exiting to this side. All the plugs soldered and extended. Our fuse block's gonna go here. We're gonna run all the grounds to 1 point on the frame. Then we're gonna run our 0 gauge up to the battery. Nice and clean and organized. Look at that. All the house electric wires gone.